Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this presentation, I will explore how the myth of the Egyptian god Osiris has influenced the story of Jesus in the New Testament. I propose that Osiris and Jesus are similar because both are allegories for the same celestial event, using astronomy as a framework for their narratives. This event is the death and resurrection of the sun during the winter solstice, with the Orion and Ophiuchus constellations playing key roles. One of the most striking parallels is the three-day death and resurrection. While this concept is well known in the story of Jesus, I will present evidence through historical quotes that Osiris was also said to have died and risen on the third day. In the book Death and Afterlife of a God, Boyana Moissav says, every year in the town of Abydos, his death and resurrection after 3 days were celebrated in a publicly enacted passion play called the Mysteries of Osiris. In addition, Moissav says, sometime during the first intermediate period, Osiris acquired the status of being the great judge of the dead in the next world, who died in autumn and came back to life after 3 days. In the book, The Historical Jesus and the Mythical Christ, Gerald Massey says, Osiris, who was betrayed to his death by Sut Typhon, entered the ark of the underworld, or the tomb, on the 17th day of the month Athir, and on the 19th day at night the priest proclaimed that the lost Osiris was found. That is, he had risen again on the third day. As I will demonstrate, the 3-day death and resurrection is a story of the sun at the winter solstice. Therefore, I want to look at some quotes that show how Osiris is merged with the sun god Ra. Moissav says, in the 6th hour, Ra encountered Osiris in the judgment hall. He permeated the body of Osiris, and the two gods became the united one, a single deity that transcended all divisions. In the book Egyptian Mythology, Geraldine Pinch says, in the darkest hour of the night, the soul of the sun god Ra reached the cave where the body lay and became one with the soul of Osiris. In the myth of Isis and Osiris, Set builds a beautiful coffin and proposes that whoever fits into the coffin may keep it. When Osiris tries, he fits perfectly. Set and 72 conspirators seal the coffin shut and Osiris suffocates. Eventually, Isis will find and resurrect Osiris so they can conceive Horus. I am now going to explain this myth as an astrological allegory. And the important thing to observe is that the astrological crucifixion of Jesus is going to copy the mechanics or the astrological movements in this demonstration. It is well known in Egyptology that Osiris is the constellation Orion, and Isis is the star Sirius. These astrological positions are half of the allegory. The other half of the allegory is on the side of the planisphere that is opposite Orion. In this case, the constellation Ophiuchus is opposite Orion. Because these constellations are opposite each other, they represent a perfect fit. As Orion falls in the west, Ophiuchus rises in the east. Note that my planisphere labels Ophiuchus coffin, and that the constellation Virgo is right above the coffin. In the book Osiris, Death and Afterlife of a God, Boyana Moissav says, Isis came to be worshipped as a primordial virgin and their child as savior of the world. Essentially, Isis and Osiris go below the horizon in the west as the star Sirius and the constellation Orion, and they pop up in the east as Virgo and Ophiuchus, the coffin. Note how the picture of Isis hovering above the entombed Osiris is the same as Virgo hovering above Ophiuchus, the coffin. This is a picture of the sun rising in the constellation of Ophiuchus at approximately 6 a.m. during the winter solstice. The word solstice means sun stands still, and on this day, the sun is in transition, lingering in place. Allegorically, this moment represents the death of the sun. Ophiuchus acts as a celestial coffin. The sun, or shall I say Osiris, is now entombed within it. The myth of Osiris mentions 72 conspirators, a number that may serve as a key to understanding the 3-day death and resurrection motif. After all, 3 times 24 hours equals 72 hours, or exactly 3 days. Using this information, we can calculate how the sun dies and resurrects on the third day. There are 365 days in a year, 360 degrees in a circle, and 2 solstices, the winter and the summer. The 2 solstices are events when the sun does not move on a sundial. The ancients measured the sun's movement 1 degree every day when the sun moved. Thus, we have 360 degrees in a circle because the sun moved 360 days. This equation demonstrates that there are 5 total days when the sun is not moving, and these 5 days are divided by the 2 solstices when the sun is not moving. As a result, during the winter solstice when the sun is near Ophiuchus, the coffin, the sun is dead for 2.5 days and then resurrects. That is, the sun dies on Friday, remains motionless throughout Saturday, and then, halfway through Sunday, it begins to ascend once more. This celestial pattern mirrors the legendary 3-day death and resurrection of Osiris and Jesus. Now we're going to examine the astrological crucifixion of Jesus and compare it with the Osiris allegory. As you can see, the Orion constellation is located near the 6th hour of right ascension, which lies between the 3rd and the 9th hours. Here are quotes from the New Testament that show Jesus is crucified between the 3rd and the 9th hours. Once again, we refer to the quote that says Osiris is merged with Ra in the 6th hour. We can see Orion, or shall I say Osiris, located at the 6th hour. We can understand that Orion is merged with the sun and is therefore symbolic of the sun. 5 stars in Orion form the astrological cross. Betelgeuse is the top, the 3 belt stars form the middle, and Rigel is the bottom. Here we see that a cross is a solar symbol. Here we see a sun cross. As a result, we can see how Ra, the sun, is merged with Osiris in the 6th hour, and how the cross is a symbol of the sun. Jesus is the sun that dies on the cross. The crucifixion at Skull Hill is an allegory for the constellation Orion and the adjacent winter triangle. The top of the triangle is the star Betelgeuse, which represents the shoulder of Orion, and next to the shoulder is the skull, as in Skull Hill. Jesus dying on a cross and placed in a tomb mirrors the astrological allegory of Osiris fitting perfectly in a coffin. Note that as Orion falls in the west, Ophiuchus, the coffin, rises in the east. This is symbolic of dying on a cross at Skull Hill and being placed in a tomb. And at this time, the sun is dead for 2.5 days, thus resurrecting on the 3rd day. Now we will examine how Psalm 22 influences the dialogue and events surrounding Jesus' crucifixion. More significantly, I will demonstrate how the figure being described as pierced in his hands and his feet is a symbolic reference to the constellation Orion and the astrological crucifixion. Psalm 22, verse 16 declares, "They have pierced my hands and my feet." This imagery echoes throughout the crucifixion narrative in the Gospels. For example, Matthew 27, verse 46 mirrors Psalm 22, verse 1, as Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In Mark 15, verse 29, we see a parallel with Psalm 22, verse 7. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads. John chapter 19, verse 28 reflects Psalm 22, verse 15, when Jesus says, "I am thirsty." Finally, Matthew 27, verse 35 echoes Psalm 22, verse 18, "They divided up his clothes by casting lots." These correlations show that the gospel authors intentionally drew from Psalm 22 to frame the crucifixion of Jesus, embedding his suffering within a well-known prophetic context. More important than the literal action and dialogue in Psalm 22 is its astrological symbolism. I will demonstrate that the Gospel writers intentionally reference Psalm 22 to guide the reader towards recognizing an astrological crucifixion allegory centered around the constellation Orion. Here is a planisphere in which I've included all the symbolic characters described in Psalm 22. The celestial figures surround the Orion constellation, forming a vivid scene of cosmic significance. Psalm 22 verse 6 says, "But I am a worm and not a man." This can be associated with the asterism Eridanus, a celestial river that winds across the sky in the shape of a snake or a worm. Psalm 22 verse 12 reads, "Many bulls surround me." Directly beneath Orion lies Taurus the bull, supporting the visual reference. Psalm 22 verse 13 states, "Roaring lions that tear their prey open their mouths wide against me." Leo the lion is featured on the planisphere, and Leo is often included in depictions involving Orion. This fits the imagery perfectly. Psalm 22 verse 14 says, "I am poured out like water." Orion is positioned adjacent to the Milky Way, often referenced to as a galactic river, reinforcing the water symbolism. Psalm 22 verse 16 mentions, "Many dogs surround me." Orion is flanked by the dog stars Sirius and Procyon, both prominent in the celestial narrative. Psalm 22 verse 20 pleads, "Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dogs." Orion is the astrological crucifixion, and the sword in this image is in the shape of a cross. In addition, Orion is traditionally depicted holding a sword shaped like a cross, directly invoking crucifixion imagery. Psalm 22 verse 21 cries, "Rescue me from the mouth of the lions, save me from the horns of the wild oxen." Again, this references both Leo and Taurus, reinforcing the constellation-based framework. These repeated symbolic connections between Psalm 22 and the celestial figures surrounding Orion suggest that the crucifixion narrative was shaped as an astrological allegory. Most significantly, both Psalm 22 and the Gospels appear to draw upon the same celestial blueprint used to represent the Egyptian god Osiris, linking ancient myth, astrology, and scripture in a single cosmic narrative. Now we're going to explore clues suggesting that these stories take place during the winter solstice. As we can see, during the winter solstice, each polar region experiences continuous darkness or twilight around its winter solstice. In this diagram, I've placed a red arrow to the far right, pointing to the North Pole. As you can see, the sun does not shine on this part of the Earth during the winter solstice. However, Jesus is crucified in Jerusalem, and Osiris dies in Egypt, locations that do receive sunlight. This is where the writers of these myths use hyperbola. Hyperbola is a literary device defined as an exaggerated statement not meant to be taken literally. In this case, the narratives are written from the symbolic perspective of the North Pole, where the sun completely disappears during the solstice. Because of this extreme symbolic perspective, the event of the winter solstice can be allegorized in many ways. For example, the sun may be said to be hiding, missing, or even dead. In one gospel story, Jesus is 12 years old and goes missing for 3 days while teaching in the temple. This represents the sun's symbolic journey around the zodiac. The sun travels through the 12 signs or ages of the zodiac, and at age 12, it returns to the solstice point and is missing for 3 days before being reborn. Similarly, during Jesus' crucifixion, there is darkness for 3 hours. In this context, the number 3 likely symbolizes the 3 days of the solar death and resurrection, a key solstice motif. In The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, author John Allegro writes, "More than any other heavenly body, it was the sun which commanded most respect as the embodiment of God. It was the creator, the fecundicator of the earth. The ancients saw the glowing orb as the tip of the divine penis." In the Osiris myth, he is cut into 14 pieces, and Isis finds all but one, his penis. Since the phallus is symbolic of the sun, the missing penis represents the missing sun, reinforcing the winter solstice setting. Even Shakespeare echoes these themes. In Romeo and Juliet, the Star and the Cross lovers, which mirrors the crucifixion narrative and the Osiris-Isis myth, at the end of the play, the prince declares, "The sun for sorrow will not show his head." In this story, Juliet becomes the symbolic sun who seemingly dies and resurrects after 2 and 40 hours. Using numerology, where zeros represent nothing, we interpret 2 and 40 as 20 and 40, which equals 60 hours. Dividing 60 hours by 24 hours gives us 2.5 days, a clear parallel to the sun's symbolic death and resurrection during the solstice. The prototype for Romeo and Juliet is Pyramus and Thisbe, which ties us back to Orion, also known as Osiris, who is associated with the pyramid. In life, Egyptian pharaohs were believed to be the earthly incarnation of Horus, the sun god. In death, they wished to be united with Osiris. Because Orion, or Osiris, is aligned with the pyramids in the sky, pharaohs were buried in pyramids on earth, illustrating the Hermetic principle, as above, so below. That which is connected to Osiris in the heavens is mirrored on earth, forming a cosmic link between mythology, astronomy, and ritual burial. Now, I will examine another potential contradiction, the idea that Jesus dies and resurrects during the Passover, a festival traditionally associated with the spring equinox. The term Passover originates from the biblical account involving the angel of death. But when the angel saw the blood of the Israelite doorframes, he would pass over their homes so that the plague would not enter, hence the name. In this context, Passover refers to a specific event, not strictly a time of year. Similarly, the astrological crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus can also be interpreted as a Passover event. As the constellation Orion, the astrological cross, sets in the west, it passes over to Ophiuchus, the coffin, which rises in the east. This celestial transition reinforces the allegory of dying on a cross and being placed in a tomb. Let's consider a definition of the term Passover. Highlighted in blue, we find, make a passage or journey from one place to another. In this allegorical context, it refers to a journey from Orion the cross to Ophiuchus the coffin. Coincidentally, the red arrows point to another listed synonym such as travel across, cross, cut across, get across, and pass across. This supports the idea that the crucifixion or dying on a cross is a Passover event. Therefore, the term Passover does not necessarily contradict the idea of the sun dying on a cross and being placed in a tomb during the winter solstice. Rather, it supports the allegorical context of the story, in which Passover refers to what is happening, not when it is happening. Easter is the time we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Interestingly, Easter is celebrated on the first Sunday after the first full moon on or after the vernal equinox. Osiris, too, is said to have been resurrected during the spring equinox. In this case, let us focus on the erection aspect embedded in the word resurrection. As Boyana Moissaff writes, the resurrection of Osiris was represented as a sexual union of Osiris and Isis, the engendering of the Savior child. She goes on to say, Horus the child was conceived at the spring equinox, the time of harvest, and born at the winter solstice. This illustrates a symbolic alignment. Osiris is resurrected and conceives Horus at the spring equinox, the same period during which Christians celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. In Christ in Egypt, the Horus-Jesus connection, D.M. Murdoch notes, Isis, as we have already seen, has been deemed a perpetual virgin regardless of the manner of her impregnation. This raises an intriguing question. How does Virgo remain a perpetual virgin? The answer lies in the symbolic action of the Passover. In this context, Passover refers to the astrological transition of Virgo to Pisces during the spring equinox. As Pisces rises in the east, Virgo falls in the west, thus passing over to Pisces. Once Virgo passes over to Pisces, she becomes pregnant in the same manner a female fish does, virginally. Pisces, symbolized by the two fish, mirrors the natural process of fish reproduction, where eggs are laid and fertilized externally, without physical union. Furthermore, the fish glyph resembles a farmer's plow. For ancient agricultural societies, Pisces marked the season when farmers copy what the fish do. The plowing of the field and planting of the seeds simulates the female fish laying her eggs in a riverbed. Similarly, the sun, seen in ancient symbolism as a generative force, ejaculates the spring rain akin to fertilizing the earth. This simulates the male fish ejaculating on fish eggs planted in a riverbed. Thus, just as fish give virgin births, Virgo takes this characteristic as she passes over during the spring equinox. The Virgo symbol, a stylized letter M with a Vesca Pisces attached, supports the idea that Virgo will have Pisces-like characteristics and give a virgin birth. The symbolic link between Virgo and Pisces supports the allegory of conception at the spring equinox and birth 9 months later at the winter solstice. Furthermore, the Christian traditions of Christmas and Easter reflect the birth of Horus at the winter solstice and the resurrection of Osiris at the spring equinox. Now we will compare Jesus to Horus the child, specifically focusing on the death and resurrection of Horus the child. As I will demonstrate, this story represents the sun's death as it completes its cycle, passing by the constellations Scorpio and Sagittarius. The death and resurrection of Horus the child is recorded in the Metternich Stela. In the book, An Anthology of Sacred Texts by and About Women, Serenity Young summarizes the story. Isis briefly leaves Horus alone to go to a town for food. When she returns, he has been killed by the sting of a scorpion. Isis weeps and laments, but with the help of her sister Nephthys and the god Thoth, Horus is restored to life. Young continues by giving further details of the narrative. They found where he was, and a scorpion stung him, and the slayer of the heart had stabbed him. Placed Isis her nose in his mouth to know if he had breath, he who was in his coffin. Stood still the disk of the sun. In The Three Princes of Persia, Rohini Chaudhary adds more details. Out of concern for Isis, Re stopped his boat, and the earth was plunged into darkness. Thoth, god of wisdom and ever Isis's friend, left Re's boat and came down to help her. He uttered powerful spells over Horus and threatened that the earth would stay dark forever unless Horus came back to life. These references to the sun standing still and the earth plunging into darkness are clues that the story is based on the winter solstice. The concept of darkness is mirrored in the crucifixion of Jesus, where there was darkness over the land. This graphic illustrates the details of the story, where Horus the child represents the sun traveling along the ecliptic. He is stung by the scorpion Scorpio and stabbed by the archer Sagittarius before being placed in Ophiuchus, the coffin. Finally, he is resurrected as the sun begins a new cycle. Similarly, in the story of Jesus, we see him being kissed by Judas in the Garden of Gethsemane. By adding the astrological symbols, we can see that Judas is a personification of the constellation Scorpio, delivering the fatal kiss. The sting of the scorpion is often referred to as the kiss of death because the sting leaves two bumps resembling a pair of lips. Sagittarius is personified as the Roman soldier who pierces Jesus with a spear. Thus, both Horus the child and Jesus serve as personifications of the dying sun, stung by Scorpio, pierced by Sagittarius, and placed in Ophiuchus, the coffin. Here we can see that through syncretism with Aya, Osiris becomes associated with the moon. As a result, Osiris can be viewed as a solar-lunar deity, possessing both solar and lunar characteristics. I will demonstrate that the 14 pieces Osiris was cut into correspond symbolically to both lunar and solar cycles. The moon wanes from full to new over approximately 14 days. In this interpretation, the death of Osiris occurs just after the full moon, and the 14 dismembered pieces represents the 14 days of the waning moon. Egyptologist Geraldine Pinch notes that the lunar cycle also came to be linked with the death and revival of Osiris. Similarly, the Greek writer Plutarch reported the belief that the 14 days of the waning moon were equated with the 14 parts of the dismembered body of Osiris, which had to be joined together to make him whole again. D.M. Murdoch writes, the Egyptians have a legend that the end of Osiris's life came on the 17th of the month, on which day it is quite evident to the eye that the period of the full moon is over. Here we see a scarab beetle rolling a ball of dung, a symbol of the scarab pushing the sun across the sky. The scarab itself is often depicted with horns on its arms and head, 14 in total. This symbolism suggests that the scarab pushes the sun through 14 constellations, the 12 zodiac signs, the so-called 13th sign Ophiuchus, and the 14th, Orion, which represents Osiris. In parallel, Jesus' 12 disciples correspond to the 12 zodiac signs. As Jesus dies on the cross of Orion and is placed in the coffin of Ophiuchus, he too can be symbolically said to be cut into 14 pieces, just like Osiris.
By the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this way comes.
Although Jesus is not a moon god in the way Osiris is, the moon plays a crucial role in the astrological crucifixion of Jesus. To build this case, we begin with the phrase, an eye for an eye. In Hebrew law, the phrase in Exodus and Leviticus literally means one eye in place of one eye. Geraldine Pinch notes, when Horus was imagined as a celestial falcon, his right eye was the sun, and his left eye was the moon. In this context, one eye in place of one eye implies that during the crucifixion, the moon will take the place of the sun. This Egyptian influence on the Christian story is echoed in the literature of ancient Egypt, which states, "You are to be in my place, my vicar. Thus you shall be called Thoth, the vicar of Re." Here, Thoth, the god of the moon, takes the place of Re, the sun. In parallel, Simon Peter becomes the first pope, the vicar of Christ, and in legend, he is crucified upside down. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 23, Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan." And in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14, "And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light." The legend of Satan tells us he was once among God's brightest angels before turning to the dark side. This mirrors the moon cycle. At the full moon, it reflects the sun's glory, but at the new moon, it turns completely dark, seemingly denying the sun. Hecate illustrates this duality. As a triple goddess, her three forms correspond to the phases of the moon: new, waxing, and full. These phases may be seen as the three witches. Jesus also gives Simon Peter the keys to heaven, while Hecate is described as the holder of the keys that can unlock the gates between realms, even the gates of death. Similarly, Diana was understood as a trinity: Diana the huntress, Diana the moon, Diana of the underworld. These three aspects mirror Osiris. Osiris is the moon, Osiris as the lord of the underworld, Osiris as Orion, and Orion is the great hunter. Orion's death parallels both Horus and Jesus. Orion's death by the bow of Artemis or the sting of the giant scorpion which becomes Scorpius, and his elevation to the heavens. Before addressing Simon Peter's lunar crucifixion in Orion, we must locate the moon during the Galactic Alignment of December 21st, 2012. On this date, the moon was in Pisces. Pisces, the constellation of the two fish, represents Simon and Andrew, the two fishermen. Because the moon was in Pisces, Simon takes on lunar symbolism, and Jesus renames him Peter, Petra meaning rock, here the moon itself. A second Simon, Simon of Cyrene, helps carry the cross. This links the moon to the crucifixion in a striking way. Cyrene was a fierce huntress, a deer-chasing second Artemis, the girl lion killer. She was a companion of Artemis, who had given her 2 hunting dogs. This associates Cyrene with Orion, who hunts the lion and stands beside the 2 dog stars, Sirius and Procyon. In myth, Cyrene also guards cattle and sheep, symbols of Taurus and Aries, 2 constellations neighboring Orion. On an adapted star chart, placing the moon between Gemini and Taurus situates it on Orion's cross. Thus, Simon, the moon, is crucified upon the cross. Luke chapter 23, verse 26 reads, "As the soldiers led him away, they seized Simon from Cyrene, who was on his way from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus." Here, allegorically, the cross is placed upon the moon. Cyrene links Orion with the lunar goddesses Hecate, Artemis, and Diana. Diana's role as a goddess of the countryside resonates with Simon of Cyrene's coming from the country. Most significantly, both Simon Peter and Simon of Cyrene are described as being behind Jesus. Jesus says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Simon of Cyrene made to carry the cross behind Jesus. This imagery foreshadows Simon Peter's upside-down crucifixion. Orion, the hunter, is often shown with a sword or a dagger. In the Gospel, Simon Peter cuts off the ear of Malchus. The name Malchus means king, echoing Leo, the Lion King. In this image, Simon Peter is cutting off the ear of Malchus as the moon is in the clouds. Symbolically, the moon, above the sky, is personified by Simon Peter below in the story. The clouds represent the Milky Way, and the Psalm 22 reference to being poured out like water. In Revelation's vision of the 4 horsemen, the red horseman wields a sword, combining Orion and Taurus. A blood moon appears beneath him. The white horseman is Sagittarius and Scorpio. The Roman soldier below is stabbing in the direction of Orion, the cross. As Orion falls in the west, it passes over to Ophiuchus, which is between Sagittarius and Scorpio. Therefore, Orion, the cross, meets with the sun, and the sun dies on the cross as it is stung by Scorpio and pierced by Sagittarius. Revelation chapter 6 verse 12 states, "I watched as the Lamb broke the 6th seal, and there was a great earthquake. The sun became as dark as black cloth, and the moon as red as blood." This blood moon aligns with the earthquake at Jesus' crucifixion and allegorizes the sun's death at the winter solstice when it is as dark as black cloth. Joel chapter 2 verse 31 and Acts chapter 2 verse 20 repeat this, the sun turning dark, the moon to blood. On December 21st, 2012, the moon appeared as a first quarter waxing moon. Visually, 1/4 of the moon reflected sunlight while 3/4 were dark. Allegorically, this mirrors Simon Peter's 3 denials of Jesus. Since only the near side of the moon is visible to us, its quarters divide into 2 visible and 2 hidden. In this case, only 1 visible quarter reflected the sun. Thus, 3/4, both hidden and visible, denied the sun 3 times before the cock crowed. This is Simon Peter denying Jesus 3 times before the cock crowed. This is image number 35 from the Lost Book of Nostradamus. The rooster symbolizes Peter's denial of Christ. The cock crowing 3 times as Simon Peter denies Jesus 3 times. At the center, the 8-spoked wheel represents the Galactic Alignment of December 21st, 2012, a moment linked to the idea that the moon denied the sun 3 times. On one side of the image stands Orion, holding the tail of Leo, the lion. Opposite Orion is Ophiuchus, holding the serpent. These constellations play crucial roles in the cosmic drama of the sun's death, Orion as the cross, and Ophiuchus as the coffin or the tomb. Between Orion and Ophiuchus stands Virgo, holding a sheaf of wheat. She represents the Virgin Mary and the woman of the apocalypse, playing an important role in the birth of the sun. The crown in this image corresponds to Corona Australis, which lies near Sagittarius. Revelation 12 describes the woman given 2 wings of the great eagle. In this star map, Virgo moves towards the eagle, identified here with Scorpio. Scorpio lies along the Milky Way, which can be envisioned as cosmic waters. The name Mary means drop of the sea or marine. Thus, the Virgin Mary may symbolize Virgo moving into the Milky Way, the waters of heaven. This planisphere illustrates that journey. Virgo, in spirit or as a ghost, enters the Milky Way to give birth to the sun, identified with Christ. Meanwhile, the moon that dies on Orion's cross passes over to Ophiuchus, the coffin. In this way, Virgo is clothed with the sun, the moon is at her feet, and her crown is Corona Australis. Virgo's sheaf of wheat touches a dark circle, symbolic of the Great Rift, a band of darkness that covers 1/3 of the Milky Way. Within this same region lies Serpens Cauda, the serpent's tail, immersed in the Milky Way, here equated with the Red Sea. The serpent's tail becomes the red dragon of Revelation, sweeping 1/3 of the stars from heaven with its tail. For comparison, consider the image of Isis with her crescent headdress and foot upon a celestial sphere. Both images link the goddess figure, Isis or Virgo, with the dark rift, located between Sagittarius, the horseman, and Scorpio, the eagle. The numbers 1260 and a times, and half a time are symbolic of the lunar cycles. 1260 divided by 3.5 equals 360, the number of days in a solar year. 1260 divided by 45, the number of days the sun spans in Virgo, equals 28, the number of days in a lunar cycle. In this symbolic framework, Virgo, in spirit or as a ghost, moves into the Milky Way by her name, since Mary means of the sea. Similarly, the name Peter makes Simon the rock or the moon. Once Simon is equated with the moon, Simon of Cyrene then moves the moon in spirit or as a ghost to the constellation of Orion, which represents the character Cyrene. When Simon gets behind Jesus, he will be on the north side of the sky. Here, Simon will be crucified upside down. As I have demonstrated, the moon plays an important role in the stories of Osiris and Jesus. To see my analysis of the quatrains of Nostradamus and the pictures from the Lost Book of Nostradamus that are referencing the moon's role in the astrological crucifixion, see my video, Nostradamus, Biblical Procession, and the Song Aquarius, starting at 1 hour and 20 minutes. The number 72 holds deep symbolic meaning in both mythology and esoteric traditions. In Egyptian mythology, Osiris was killed by Set and 72 conspirators. Similarly, in Christian tradition, Jesus is said to have had 72 disciples in addition to the original 12 apostles. However, 72 is not just a mythological number. It also has rich allegorical and astronomical significance, particularly in the context of the precession of the equinoxes. a concept explored in the seminal work Hamlet's Mill. Hamlet's Mill demonstrates how ancient myths encoded astronomical knowledge using allegory and celestial symbolism. One way this knowledge was passed down was through astrological allegories rooted in the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of the Earth's axis that causes the zodiacal backdrop of the equinoxes to shift over time. The number 72 plays an essential role in this process. The zodiac can be divided into 72 decans, each covering 5 degrees of the 360-degree circle. The sun passes through all 72 decans over the course of a year. Symbolically, the sun dies for 72 hours during the winter solstice, when it appears to stop moving on the horizon for 3 days before rising again. In the larger cosmic cycle, the sun appears to move 1 degree against the backdrop of the stars every 72 years due to precession. To complete the full cycle of the 12 astrological ages, known as the Great Year, the sun must precess through all 360 degrees of the zodiac. 72 years times 360 degrees equals 25,920 years. This number, 25,920, appears to be allegorically referenced in Numbers chapter 1, verses 44 through 46. These were the men counted by Moses and Aaron and the 12 leaders of Israel, each one representing his family. All the Israelites 20 years old or more who were able to serve in Israel's army were counted according to their families. The number totaled 603,550. Dividing 603,550 by 25,920 yields approximately 23.29, which correlates closely with the Earth's axial tilt, estimated at 23.5 degrees. The very tilt responsible for the precession of the equinoxes. Furthermore, the 12 tribes of Israel symbolically correspond to the 12 signs of the zodiac. As you can see in the planisphere, Sagittarius and Scorpio only appear on the south side, aligning with the biblical account of 2 tribes situated in the south. In summary, the number 72 symbolizes the 72 decans through which the sun must move annually, the 72 hours the sun dies at the winter solstice, and the 72 years required for the sun to precess 1 degree. Now we will explore several ways the zodiac can be divided to better understand the allegory found in Luke chapter 10, verse 1. In A History of Western Astrology, Nicholas Campion writes, "As if the selection of the core 12 disciples was not obvious enough, Jesus also selected a further band of 72 disciples." He continues, "There also appears to have been a ritual connection between the number 12 and the numbers 7, 70, and 72. In Exodus, the 12 leaders of the tribes were supplemented by 70 elders, a model Jesus follows when he appointed 70 additional disciples to supplement the original 12. D.M. Murdoch draws a mythological parallel with the Osiris story. In addition, the 72 conspirators in the later version of the Osiris myth likewise possess astrotheological meaning, representing the 72 dodecans, or division of the circle of the zodiac, into 5 degrees each. Interestingly, in the gospel story of Luke chapter 10, verse 1, Jesus is depicted with either 70 or 72 disciples, the number 70 often symbolizing the dodecans as well. In Luke chapter 10, verse 1, we read, "After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go." The allegory becomes evident. The 72 are sent out in pairs, forming 36 pairs, which symbolically represent the division of the zodiacal circle into 72 segments of 5 degrees each and 36 segments of 10 degrees each. These disciples symbolically prepare the path through the zodiac, just as Jesus travels symbolically through the 12 signs represented by his core 12 disciples. This concept is mirrored in other myths. For example, in one well-known image, Samson is shown pushing a grinding mill. Samson's name means man of the sun, and this visual metaphor is supported by the thesis of the book Hamlet's Mill, as the sun revolving through the zodiac is allegorized as a celestial millstone revolving circularly. A similar image appears in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus meets with his 12 disciples. The word Gethsemane means oil press, again invoking the idea of circular motion, symbolic of the sun's path through the zodiac.
Double toil and trouble. Fire burn and cauldron bubble. Fillet of a finny snake. In the cauldron boil and bake.
The Tree of Life is a fundamental archetype in many of the world's mythological, religious, and philosophical traditions. It is closely related to the concept of the sacred tree. Both Jesus and Osiris have trees associated with their narratives. As Moisov says, Isis sailed beyond the mouth of the river into the vast emptiness of the sea looking for the coffin. It had washed ashore on the Phoenician coast at Byblos and taken root in a tamarisk tree. In the Christian tradition, the tree also appears symbolically in reference to Jesus' death. In Acts chapter 10, verse 39, we read, "And we are witnesses of all things which he did, both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem, whom they slew and hanged on a tree." Likewise, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 24 states, "Who his own self bare our sins in his own body on the tree." As I shall demonstrate, Ophiuchus is symbolically the tree of life. In mythology and ancient iconography, the tree of life is often depicted as a central tree flanked by two symmetrical figures. Here we read, "A typical imagery preserved in ancient iconography is that of two symmetrical figures facing each other, with a tree standing in the middle." In Sumerian depictions of the tree of life, we often see two symmetrical serpents facing each other with a tree in between. The red arrows in the image point to these serpents, which represent the dual forces flanking the tree, a common archetype across ancient mythologies. On a star map, if we examine the northern and southern hemispheres, we can observe the constellation Ophiuchus, situated between the serpent's caput, the serpent's head, and the serpent's cauda, the serpent's tail. The two halves of the serpents face each other, with Ophiuchus standing between them, symbolically forming the tree of life between the twin serpents. When we visualize the serpent's constellation as a single connected serpent looping around Ophiuchus, it resembles the Ouroboros, the ancient symbol of the serpent eating its own tail, representing infinity, rebirth, and eternal life. The symbolism reinforces Ophiuchus as a celestial representation of the tree of life. This mirrors Norse mythology, where Yggdrasil, the cosmic world tree, is intertwined with serpents at its roots and encircled by a snake eating its tail, which is symbolically an Ouroboros. This symbolism is consistent across cultures: the tree, the serpent, and eternal life. The tree of life first appears in Genesis chapter 2 and 3, described as the source of eternal life in the Garden of Eden. In Revelation chapter 2, verse 7, it says, "To the one who is victorious, I will give the right to eat from the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God." Symbolically, Ophiuchus represents God's paradise and eternal life in heaven, while the adjacent Milky Way represents the galactic river or the lake of fire, a celestial divide between heaven and hell. In Revelation 22, we read, "On each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month." This vision corresponds to two planispheres. In one, Ophiuchus stands to the left side of the Milky Way. In the other, it appears to the right side, emphasizing the tree's presence on both sides of the river, just as depicted in Revelation. The 12 crops of fruit symbolically align with the 12 signs of the zodiac, reinforcing Ophiuchus as the 13th and hidden sign, the guardian of eternal knowledge and healing. Revelation 22 continues, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. This matches the identity of Ophiuchus as Asclepius, the Greek god of healing, who holds the serpent, a direct astronomical connection. Asclepius' role as a healer ties directly into the biblical function of the tree of life as a source of healing and immortality. Finally, Revelation 22 declares, "And they will reign forever and ever." This suggests eternal life in the celestial realm, aligning symbolically with Ophiuchus as a heavenly station, a place where one soul resides in God's paradise. This is the Egyptian goddess Sishat, a deity associated with science, astronomy, mathematics, and geometry. To grant the king immortality, she recorded the name of the king on the leaves of the tree of life, which grew near where she lived. In this image, we see Sishat with the tree of life accompanied by a king. A red arrow points to the symbol above her head, a 7-branch figure with a central stem, forming an 8-pointed star. This symbol parallels the 8-spoked wheel and symbolic trees seen in the Lost Book of Nostradamus, which I will argue represent the tree of life. In another image, we see Ra in the form of the great tomcat. Egyptologist Geraldine Pinch writes, "One terrible night, Ra himself took the form of the great tomcat and fought the Apophis serpent under the ish tree at Heliopolis. He sliced up Apophis with his knife and split the ish tree into two, creating the twin trees of the horizon." This supports the idea of duality in the serpent and the tree of life. There are two serpents, or two halves of the same serpent, and as we observe both the northern and southern skies, we encounter twin trees, symbolic reflections of twin trees on each side of the Milky Way. Now that we recognize Ophiuchus as both a symbolic coffin and the tree of life, we can better understand the parallels between Osiris and Jesus. In this case, Osiris's coffin becomes embedded in a sacred tree, and Jesus is hung on a tree, symbolically the tree of life.
In every point twice done, and then done double.
Now we're looking at the winter hexagon. Highlighted in yellow within the hexagon lie the constellation Orion and the winter triangle, formed by the stars Sirius, Procyon, and Betelgeuse. As we examine this image, we'll follow Lady Macbeth's instructions. In every point twice done, and then done double. In this context, double refers to a mirrored view of the northern and southern hemispheres of the night sky, with Sirius as the central point. On the northern side of a planisphere, the 3 belt stars of Orion appear to the left of Sirius. On the southern side, they appear to the right. This celestial mirroring creates the menorah. Now, consider the Arch of Titus, where the menorah is shown with a double hexagon at its base. This echoes Lady Macbeth's saying, "In every point twice done." When we mirror the winter triangle, we create 2 intersecting triangles, forming a Star of David. In doing so, we fulfill Lady Macbeth's symbolic directive. Each point of the winter hexagon is done twice and then done double, once as the menorah and again as the Star of David. This interpretation suggests that Lady Macbeth's familiarity with Jewish symbolism may relate to the curse of Matthew chapter 27, verse 25. All the people answered, "His blood is on us and on our children." Her obsessive guilt and the blood she can't wash off her hands may symbolically connect to this inherited curse. Finally, we return to the image of the double serpents, a reference to the witch's chant, "Double, double, toil and trouble." This doubling of the double serpents evokes the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, a symbol of eternal life, which in this context encircles the coffin of Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. Next, we'll examine the quatrains of Nostradamus alongside illustrations from the Lost Book of Nostradamus. Nostradamus was a French astrologer, apothecary, physician, and reputed seer, best known for his book Les Prophéties. The Man Who Saw Tomorrow is a 1981 American documentary-style film exploring his predictions. The History Channel has also featured many programs about Nostradamus, including the series Nostradamus Effect. While many interpret Nostradamus' writings as predictions of the future, I take a different view. Rather than prophetic, I believe his work reflects an esoteric understanding of astrological allegories, many which are embedded in the Bible, such as the Tree of Life and the Osiris-Jesus parallels we've already explored. Consider quatrain 2-13. The number 213 is itself significant. Ophiuchus, the often overlooked 13th sign of the zodiac, becomes especially meaningful when doubled. 2 times 13 is symbolic of looking at Ophiuchus twice, which, as we have seen, results in the Ouroboros surrounding Ophiuchus, the coffin. Let's break down the lines of quatrain 2-13. The first line says, "The body without soul, no longer to be sacrificed." This line evokes the moment of Jesus' death on the cross, when he says, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." His soul ascends while his body remains behind, now without soul. Astrologically, this represents the transition into Ophiuchus. The second line says, "Day of death put for birthday." This clearly alludes to the winter solstice, the point at which the sun dies and is reborn. It is both an ending and a beginning. The third line says, "The divine spirit will make the soul happy." This line supports the idea that in Ophiuchus, the heavenly realm, the divine spirit brings peace and fulfillment to the soul. The fourth line says, "Seeing the Word in its eternity." In biblical tradition, the Word refers to God or Christ. Here, seeing the Word in its eternity links Ophiuchus as the astrological house of God, where one's soul goes for eternity. The Tree of Life plays an important role in creation. Ophiuchus played an important role during the Galactic Alignment on December 21, 2012. Ophiuchus is the pathway from our viewpoint to the center of the Milky Way galaxy, a spiral galaxy, which is the source of the numbers associated with the creation story in the Bible. In the Lost Book of Nostradamus, images 67 and 68 both depict a tree, symbolically the Tree of Life. Their numbering reflects a numerical pattern tied to 2 times 13. Image 67, 6 plus 7 is 13. Image 68, 6 plus 8 equals 14, or 13 plus 1. Both images also feature an 8-spoked wheel at the top, which, as Vincent Bridges notes in the History Channel documentary, symbolizes the galactic alignment that occurred during the winter solstice of December 21, 2012. Previously, I argued that the crucifixion of Jesus is an astrological allegory of the sun's death at the winter solstice, and that Orion passes over to Ophiuchus as a Passover event. These images support that interpretation. In image 67, Pisces appears with Sagittarius. In image 68, Scorpio is shown with Aries. Therefore, the astrological signs of the winter solstice and the spring equinox are out of alignment. I have corrected the constellations in these images. Image 67 now aligns Aries with Pisces. The crown figure above them can be interpreted as Corona Borealis, and the man, shaped like a boot, symbolizes the constellation Boots. The phrase, "one male," appears in the book. The position next to the tree correlates to the constellation Hercules. Image 68 includes a ribbon above Scorpio and Sagittarius, dividing the northern and southern skies. These constellations represent 2 southern tribes, while Hercules, visible only in the northern sky, stands with his club next to the Tree of Life, Ophiuchus. This alignment matches the planisphere of the northern sky, where Ophiuchus is surrounded by Hercules, Boots, and Corona Borealis. Image 68 also includes a sword wrapping in a spiral ribbon and a golden rectangle between Scorpio and Sagittarius. These elements echo the Fibonacci sequence and the geometry of the Milky Way galaxy, a spiral galaxy associated with the golden ratio. This part of the sky between Scorpio and Sagittarius is precisely where the Earth and the Sun will align with the galactic center during the winter solstice of December 21st, 2012. This is also where we find Ophiuchus. Thus, the golden rectangle in image 68 symbolizes Ophiuchus as the tree of life, and the Fibonacci sequence reflects both a family tree and the biblical creation story. The biblical creation story can be viewed through the lens of the Fibonacci numbers. 0, there was no man. 1, God created Adam in his image. 1, from Adam, God created Eve. 2, Adam and Eve are joined in union. 3, their children, Cain, Abel, and Seth. 5, then they had many more children. This mirrors the Taoist conception of creation, as Serenity Young quotes from The Way of Life. The Tao produced 1, 1 produced 2, 2 produced 3, 3 produced all things. This image supports the connection between the Fibonacci sequence numbers, the creation story, and the tree of life. One tree trunk becomes 2 branches, then 3, then 5, then 8, just like the Fibonacci sequence unfolding in nature. Ophiuchus represents the house of God in the sky, symbolic of heaven and the Garden of Eden. If Adam is made in God's image and God is Ophiuchus, then Adam too is Ophiuchus. Eve becomes Virgo, who is tempted by serpent's kaput, the serpent's head. The sun resides in Ophiuchus for 18 days, often rounded to 20. The sun resides in Virgo for 44.5 days, rounded to 45. According to Genesis, Adam lived to be 930 years old. If we divide this between the symbolic duration of Ophiuchus and Virgo, 930 divided by 45 equals 20.66, or approximately 20. This symbolic math supports the idea that Adam is Ophiuchus and Eve is Virgo. The math of Virgo provides the possibility of a stunning plot twist. Virgo lies between 13 and 14 hours of right ascension. Adding the time Virgo spans, 45 days, and the right ascension values, we get 45 plus 13 plus 14 equals 72. Isis is Virgo. Did she conspire with Set to seal Osiris's coffin? Or is this the allegory for having 72 virgins when you go to heaven, which again is Ophiuchus? Jesus and Osiris are both associated with the ark. Strikingly, both Osiris and Noah enter the ark on the 17th day. Gerald Massey writes, Osiris, who was betrayed to his death by Sut Typhon, entered the ark of the underworld, or the tomb, on the 17th of the month Aether. Similarly, Genesis chapter 7, verses 11 through 13 says, on the 17th day of the second month, on that very day, Noah entered the ark. The second coming of Jesus is also connected to Noah's ark. In Matthew 24, verse 37, we read, As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be at the coming of the Son of Man. Likewise, Luke chapter 17, verses 26 and 27 says, Just as it was in the days of Noah, so also will it be in the days of the Son of Man. Up to the day Noah entered the ark. Then the flood came and destroyed them all. Regarding Noah's ark, Hippolytus of Rome sought to demonstrate that the ark was a symbol of the Christ who was expected, stating that the vessel had its door on the east side, the direction from which Christ would appear at the second coming, and that the bones of Adam were brought aboard, together with gold, frankincense, and myrrh, the symbols of the Nativity of Christ. All these narratives interweave like the strands of a shredded wheat biscuit. The common thread, the constellation Ophiuchus, and the Galactic Alignment during the winter solstice on December 21st, 2012. To unpack this, let's return to the creation story in Adam. Since Hippolytus associates his bones with the ark, I previously linked the creation story to the Galactic Alignment. In fact, There are 2 arcs in the flood story, each corresponding to a constellation associated with Adam. The garden is represented by Ophiuchus, but Adam, once expelled, moves towards Gemini, which lies opposite Ophiuchus in the sky. So, as Ophiuchus sets in the west, Gemini rises in the east, echoing the phrase, East of Eden. As you can see, the symbol for Gemini resembles the Roman numeral 2. In the context of the Fibonacci sequence, the number 2 marks the point where Adam and Eve are joined in union. The constellation Gemini visually illustrates this connection, depicting the twins joined at the side, which echoes the biblical account of Eve being formed from Adam's rib. This imagery aligns with the interpretation of the Hebrew word tesala, which can mean either side or rib, depending on the translation. Looking at celestial images, we see the Milky Way flooding the horizon in all directions. In one such image, it stretches from Sagittarius to Scorpio. The sun spends 7 days in Scorpio and 32 days in Sagittarius, a total of 39 days, rounded up to 40. This forms the symbolic basis for the 40 days and nights of rain in the flood story. Similarly, Jesus spends 40 days with 11 disciples before ascending to heaven. The number 40 links to the Milky Way, where Ophiuchus, the astrological heaven, resides. The number 11 represents the precession of the equinoxes. During the age of Pisces, the sun rises between Capricorn and Sagittarius during the winter solstice. In the age of Aquarius, it rises between Sagittarius and Scorpio. Due to precession, the sun gradually shifts backwards through the zodiac, altering where it rises during the winter solstice. As a result, the 11 apostles symbolically represent the transition between astrological ages, marking the sun's journey through 11 zodiacal signs before the dawn of the new age. In other words, the sun begins between Capricorn and Sagittarius and ends between Sagittarius and Scorpio, thus 11 signs of the zodiac. In Revelation chapter 1, verse 7, we read, "Look, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him." The clouds are the Milky Way, and those who pierced him are symbolized by Sagittarius and Scorpio. Acts chapter 1, verse 11 states, "This same Jesus, who has been taken from you into heaven, will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven." Jesus ascends to Ophiuchus, and thus, according to this celestial symbolism, he will return from Ophiuchus at his second coming. Revelation chapter 1, verse 8 proclaims, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, who is, and who was, and who is to come." Aries is the first house of the zodiac, the Alpha. Pisces, the last, the Omega. Who is refers to Pisces, who was to Aries, and who is to come to Aquarius. As we shall see, the flood story is associated with the age of Aquarius. Gemini and Ophiuchus both float within the Milky Way. Gemini, the twins, is the ark for 2 of every kind of animal, while Ophiuchus, the house of God, is the ark for the clean animals. Genesis chapter 6, verse 15 gives the ark's dimensions. The ark is to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. By plotting 50 and 30 degrees of declination in the sky, we see these lines intersect with Gemini, indicating its symbolic width and height. Meanwhile, 300 degrees of celestial longitude corresponds with the age of Aquarius, the era of the Galactic Alignment. For a deeper look into this transition into Aquarius, see my video, Nostradamus, Biblical Precession, and the Song Aquarius. Genesis chapter 8, verse 5 adds, "On the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat." Astronomically, Ophiuchus sits at 17 hours of right ascension, and Gemini at 7 hours. Thus, both arcs are connected to the numbers 17 and 7. In one image, I use a black arrow to point to the winter triangle symbolizing Mount Ararat, and a green arrow to mark the 17th of July, the 7th month. Coincidence? Perhaps, but as an English major, I contend If it's there for me, it's there. The constellation Corvus, Latin for raven, represents the bird Noah sends after 40 days. One image shows Corvus perched high, symbolically surveying the flooded earth. Interestingly, its star pattern also resembles a Victorian writing desk, answering the riddle, why is a raven like a writing desk? But another question remains. Why are both Gemini and Ophiuchus associated with Noah? Let's turn to an astrology chart from December 21st, 2012. A red arrow marks the planet Jupiter in Gemini. According to Corinne Kenner's Astrology for Writers, Jupiter symbolizes when the hero of your story needs a lucky break, look for Jupiter. When all hope seems lost, Jupiter will step in to save the day. He's also a symbol of rule, of law, and order. A lottery winner. He can be overindulgent. Jupiter was the king of the gods. Jupiter takes about 12 years to orbit the Sun, spending almost a year in each sign of the zodiac. So, in 2012, Jupiter spent 1 year in Gemini, just as Noah spent approximately 370 days in the Ark. Jupiter is the king of the planets, and like the kings, pharaohs, and emperors who personify the sun, Jupiter too is a solar symbol. In this image, I placed Jupiter in Gemini and the sun in Ophiuchus. Gemini, the twins, represents the ark for two of every kind of animal, while Ophiuchus, symbolizing the Garden of Eden and the house of God, serves as the ark for the clean animals. Similarly, Jesus as the Son dies and is resurrected in Ophiuchus. The 40 days he spends with his apostles parallels the 40 days and nights of rain, a period reflected in the Milky Way where Jesus is pierced by Sagittarius and Scorpio. Ophiuchus is also the place of his second coming, as described in Scripture, coming in the clouds, or perhaps more fittingly, in this context, coming in the Milky Way. The Milky Way changes colors as it moves across the night sky, appearing to shift with the changing atmosphere and celestial context. In symbolic interpretation, the Milky Way becomes the Red Sea, which Moses parts. Likewise, the biblical motif of 40 reoccurs in various forms. The 40 days of nights and rain, Jesus' 40 days with his disciples after his resurrection, and Moses' 40 years in the wilderness. These parallels suggest a numerical code repeated across stories. This symbolic pattern continues in the birth of Moses. During the winter solstice, the sun dies and resurrects after 3 days. Correspondingly, Moses is 3 months old when he is placed into a basket, which in this interpretation corresponds to the constellation Ophiuchus. The basket used in Moses' story is called tavah, the same Hebrew word used for Noah's Ark. The word tavah is thought to be derived from an Egyptian root meaning box or coffin. Thus, Ophiuchus, the coffin, represents both the Ark of Noah and the basket of Moses. Helping to make the symbolic connection between Ophiuchus, the coffin, and Ra's solar boat, Geraldine Pinch says, the solar bark was called the boat of millions because all of the gods and all of the souls of the blessed dead might be needed in its crew. Pinch adds, in some underworld books, there are 2 solar barks, the day boat and the night boat. This leads to a parallel with Ra's 2 solar boats. As we shall see, the 2 arks of Noah mirror Ra's solar boats. This is the Dendera zodiac. The black arrow points to Ra in his solar boat. The red arrow points to Sagittarius and Scorpio. Since the constellation Ophiuchus lies between Sagittarius and Scorpio, it follows that Ophiuchus represents Ra's solar boat in this image. In the left-hand image we see Ra's solar boat, with Set battling a serpent, and a red arrow pointing to Set's waist. In the right-hand image, the red arrow points to the keystone asterism in the constellation Hercules. Here, Ra is placed in Ophiuchus, and Set, appearing as a canine-headed figure, is associated with Hercules, who grapples with the serpent's kaput. Geraldine Pinch says, other New World Kingdom texts describe Seth as committing a series of sacrilegious crimes such as felling trees. In image number 68 from the Lost Book of Nostradamus, Hercules' club is striking the Tree of Life. In Babylonian star lore, Gavin White says, the sitting dog is located among the stars of Hercules, probably occupying a large part of the Greek constellation. Importantly, Set's name in Egyptian hieroglyphs includes a sitting dog, reinforcing the connection. White further writes, like many Babylonian constellations, the mad dog has been transmitted to the star maps of Greece and Egypt. Also, the Dendera zodiac shows the standing hippo man in a divine headdress clearly reminiscent of the Babylonian figure. In various mythological compressions, Set and Horus battle in the form of hippopotami. Later Greek tradition renamed this figure as the wolf, by which name it is known to this day. Thus, Set in the form of a canine-headed figure is a composite of Lupus located in the southern sky and Hercules in the northern sky. Both constellations are seen in opposition to Orion, the celestial representation of Osiris. Yellow arrows in both images point to Orion, illustrating the cosmic seesaw. As Lupus or Hercules rise in the east, Orion sets in the west, symbolizing Set rising to power as Osiris dies. This opposition supports the larger theme. Hercules and Lupus are the adversarial counterpoints to Orion. Notably, Lupus and Orion are both located along the Milky Way. Lupus is Set and Orion is Osiris. This duality surfaces again in modern pop culture, in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, where both characters perish in a flood, echoing the archetypal cosmic deluge. In another variation, Hercules is depicted holding the heel of Ophiuchus, echoing the story of Jacob holding Esau's heel, a symbolic retelling of the struggle between celestial twins or rivals. The northern and southern donkeys associated with the constellation Cancer further emphasize the celestial narrative. In the left-hand image, Ra is in the arc Gemini. Set appears with a donkey's head in Cancer, and Hydra takes the role of the serpent. In the right-hand image, Ra is in Ophiuchus, Set is Hercules, and the serpent's kaput is again the serpent adversary. Therefore, the two solar boats of Ra align with the two arcs of Noah, represented by the constellations Gemini and Ophiuchus respectively. As we have seen, Ra has a day boat and a night boat. These are traditionally interpreted as the sun's journey across the sky during the day and its passage through the duat or the underworld at night. However, I want to explore a deeper symbolic connection to the winter and the summer solstices. Nicholas Campion, quoting Ronald Wells, writes, rather extravagantly, almost all of Egyptian astronomy and religion are derived from the observation of the solstices, the point at which the great god Ra stands still and then reverses his march along the horizon. This moment, Ra standing still, is a vivid image of the solstices, literally meaning sun stands still. As we've noted, each polar region experiences continuous darkness or twilight around its winter solstice. At either pole, there is continuous daylight at the time of the summer solstice. The opposite event is the winter solstice. In this diagram, we can see this from the viewpoint of the North Pole. On the right, a red arrow points to the North Pole during the winter solstice, when the sun does not rise. On the left, a red arrow shows the summer solstice when the sun does not set. Here is an astrology chart for the summer solstice of 2012. As you can see, the sun, Ra, is in the constellation Gemini, which could be interpreted as his day boat. Below are two astrology charts for the winter solstice of 2012. On the left is a tropical astrology chart. On the right is a sidereal astrology chart. While both charts are useful as mythological or storytelling prompts, the sidereal chart is more astronomically accurate. This matters because it places the sun near the cusp of Ophiuchus and Sagittarius. A closer look reveals that the sun is just 3 degrees from Ophiuchus. In this diagram, highlighted in blue, we see if you are within 3 days of another sign, you are a blend of both. Since the sun is in Ophiuchus for 18 days, 3 of those days blend into Scorpio, and 3 blend into Sagittarius. The 3rd day into Sagittarius is December 21st, the winter solstice. Ophiuchus can also be blended with Scorpio and Sagittarius allegorically. In the left image, the coffin appears above ground. However, the coffin belongs below ground. On the right, the coffin sinks below ground, moving into Scorpio and Sagittarius. In another image, Ophiuchus is depicted as the tree of life, with roots extending into Scorpio and Sagittarius, again reinforcing the connection. Here are 2 astrology charts for December 21st, 2012. The left is tropical astrology, and the right is sidereal. If we accept the argument that signs near the cusp are blended, then either chart could be used to place the sun in Ophiuchus and therefore in Ra's night boat. These charts reveal the characters in the story. The chart on the left, summer solstice, shows a yellow arrow pointing to the sun in Gemini. The blue arrow shows Jupiter is still in Gemini, and the red arrow shows Venus is in Gemini. This is Ra's day boat. The chart on the right, the winter solstice, shows the sun in Sagittarius with Venus nearby, and Jupiter is still in Gemini. This is Ra's night boat. Venus plays a mythologically rich role. As we see in doves as symbols, in ancient Mesopotamia, doves were prominent animal symbols of Inanna Ishtar, the goddess of love, sexuality, and war. The goddess herself was sometimes believed to take the form of a dove. Aphrodite's association with doves influenced the Roman goddesses Venus and Fortuna, who also became associated with doves. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim releases a dove and a raven to find land. The dove merely circles and returns. In this context, the dove behaves like the planet Venus, circling the sun. Now we're looking at Ra's solar boat. Note that there is both a black bird and a white bird present. In this image, the scene is overlaid with the planisphere, revealing the black bird as Corvus in the sky, and the white bird symbolized by the dove and associated with Venus in Gemini alongside Ra. Ra is said to have 2 solar boats, and similarly, Noah is described as having one ark for the twins and another for the clean animals. Moreover, Ra's solar boat carries both a black and white bird, just as Noah sends out a raven and a dove. Here we are examining the 2 arks of Noah. A raven appears in Gemini, representing the ark that holds 2 of every kind of animal. The dove is seen in Ophiuchus, the house of God, symbolizing the ark reserved for the clean animals. Leviticus chapter 11, verses 13 through 15 states, "These are the birds you are to regard as unclean, and not eat because they are unclean, any kind of raven." Leviticus chapter 1, verse 14 says, "If the offering to the Lord is a burnt offering of birds, you are to offer a dove or a young pigeon." Just as there are 2 arks, there must be 2 mountains for them to rest upon. In this image, we see the mountains of Ararat, a larger mountain associated with the unclean animals, and a smaller one for the clean animals. As a result, these mountains are symbolically sacred. Sacred mountains are central to certain religions and are usually the subjects of many legends. For many, the most symbolic aspect of a mountain is its peak, because it is believed to be the closest to heaven. In this imagery, the ark for the unclean animals, in Gemini, rests on the winter triangle, while the ark for the clean animals in Ophiuchus rests on a triangle within the constellation Hercules. Notably, the peak of the Hercules triangle is symbolically connected to heaven, aligning with the traditional ideas of sacred mountains as divine thresholds. In Egyptian creation myths, They all held that the world had risen out of the lifeless waters of chaos, called Nu. They also included a pyramid-shaped mound called the Benben, which was the first thing to emerge from the waters. Here again, we are looking at the two pyramid-shaped mounds symbolically rising from the floodwaters or the Milky Way. Geraldine Pinch writes, "When the first land rose out of the dark waters of chaos, the shining Bennu bird aligned on this primeval mound." The cry of the Bennu bird marked the beginning of time. It would also announce the end of time and the return of the world to chaos. The Bennu bird was said to perch on the Benben stone, a kind of obelisk, or in the branches of a sacred willow tree. We have also seen that Venus, represented here beside the red arrows, is associated with both Gemini and Ophiuchus. Each arc rests on a pyramid, symbolic of the Benben. The connection between the Bennu bird and Noah's dove becomes clearer in Pinch's observation. The Bennu bird may originally have been identified with Venus as the morning star, making it the forerunner of renewal of creation each dawn. Now we return to the association between the Benben, or primeval mound, and the god Osiris. Pinch explains, "The pyramidion-shaped Benben stone of Heliopolis may also have been an image of the primeval mound. By the New Kingdom, the god Osiris had developed strong associations with the primeval mound. Like the Ogdod, he could be thought of as being buried in or under the mound." In this next image, we see the two pyramids or mounds. On the right, Osiris is buried in his coffin. On the left, we see the constellation Orion, representing Osiris, symbolically buried beneath the winter triangle. Once again, we delve into the quatrains of Nostradamus and explore the images from the Lost Book of Nostradamus. In this section, we'll use those illustrations to support an interpretation where the planets are allegorically connected to Noah's three sons. Let's begin with image 30 from the Lost Book. There are two ways to interpret this image as symbolic of the constellation Gemini and the biblical figures associated with it. First, consider the figure on the right, who wears a tunic, and the figure on the left, who holds a piece of linen. The number 30 suggests an allegory derived from the Samson myth, specifically the 30 tunics and the 30 pieces of linen he wagered. This connects Samson to the sun in Gemini, as 30 tunics plus 30 pieces of linen equals 60 items, corresponding to the 60 degrees of celestial longitude associated with the astrological age of Gemini. Note the letter S marked on the leg on the figure to the right. This supports an idea that Samson, whose name means man of the sun, is part of this symbolism. More importantly, this figure represents the sun and possibly Shem, whose name also begins with the letter S. Here, Shem is allegorically identified with the sun. The figure on the left wears a royal blue linen and clutches his head as if he's suffering from a hangover, referencing Noah's drunkenness and nakedness after the flood. He is seated on a triangular mound, symbolizing the arc in Gemini resting on the winter triangle. Both characters share similar hairstyles, emphasizing their symbolic twinship. As I previously argued, Jupiter is Noah, and as the king of the gods, Jupiter is also a solar symbol. In the tradition of like father, like son, Shem becomes a continuation of the solar archetype, a personification of the sun. Below is an astrological chart for the summer solstice of 2012, which shows both the sun and Jupiter positioned in Gemini, supporting this symbolic framework. Pinch writes, "The solar bark was called the boat of millions because all the gods and all the souls of the blessed dead might be needed in its crew." Here, I will focus on the idea of gods aboard the solar boat, as a clue to identifying Noah's sons, drawing parallels with Greco-Roman mythology. This is image number 60 from the Lost Book of Nostradamus. The bird depicted is holding an olive branch, clearly referencing the birds in the flood narrative. The number 60 connects to the zodiac sign Gemini, often symbolized by twins, and in this case, twin arcs. The number 60 is also significant in another way. It corresponds roughly to the combined days the sun spins in 3 constellations joined by a cusp: Scorpio, 7 days, Ophiuchus, 18 days, and Sagittarius, 32 days. Altogether, these sum to 57 days, which rounds to 60, reinforcing the symbolic use of the number. To further decode the image, I've overlaid it with planetary symbols and the glyph for Sagittarius. In the top left and center, we see a bow and a cross. The bow signifies Sagittarius, and its glyph, a crossed arrow, is echoed here. The cross, a known solar symbol, has the solar glyph added above it in this interpretation. A helmet in this image is symbolic of Aries and Mars. A rose in a vase is shown. The rose is linked to Venus, and the top of the vase is added to the top of Venus to form the symbol for Mercury. Now, turning to astronomy. Here are 2 astrology charts for December 21st, 2012 at 6 a.m., the date of the winter solstice. The yellow arrow points to Mars, labeled Japheth. Japheth's name means to extend, and the Mars glyph is a circle with an outward pointing arrow reflecting this idea. In mythology, Aries is the son of Zeus, whose Roman equivalent is Jupiter. Aries is born before Apollo, just as Japheth is born before Shem. The helmet is a symbol of Aries, whose Roman equivalent is Mars. The red arrow marks the sun, labeled Shem. In Greco-Roman terms, Apollo, god of the sun, is also a son of Zeus. Shem is the forefather of Moses and Jesus, who I have argued are personifications of the sun. The blue arrow points to Mercury, labeled Ham. Mercury is associated with trickery and thieves. He also serves as the guide of the souls to the underworld and the messenger of the gods. His father is Jupiter. His symbolic role matches Ham's actions in the flood story, seeing Noah's nakedness and spreading the message to his brothers, which can be seen as trickery or disrespect. Therefore, the astronomical arrangement on December 21st, 2012 appears to serve as an allegorical template for the flood story of Noah. Jupiter in Gemini is Noah. Venus represents the dove. Mercury, representing Ham, is the trickster and messenger. The sun represents Shem. Mars represents Japheth. Here is quatrain 4-28. The planets seen in the astrology chart for December 21st, 2012 are mentioned in this quatrain. Although this quatrain has multiple meanings, I will focus on the characters associated with the flood story. The first line reads, "When Venus will be covered by the sun." Here, Venus symbolizes the dove, and the sun represents Shem, Noah's son, who allegorically personifies the sun. The second line reads, "Under the splendor will be a hidden form." The splendor refers to the Milky Way, and the hidden form is the constellation Ophiuchus, which represents the ark for the clean animals. The third line reads, "Mercury will have exposed them to the fire." Mercury, representing Ham, is the one who exposes Noah's nakedness in the flood narrative. The fourth line reads, "Through warlike noise it will be insulted." The warlike noise symbolizes Mars, the god of war, and Japheth receives Ham's insulting message about Noah. The number in this passage is also significant when decoded. 4-28 can easily be transformed into 2 plus 8. This transforms to 2210, and this, as I shall demonstrate, transforms to 2012, which is the date of the astrology chart. Let me explain how the number code comes from Matthew 12-32 and how it relates to Luke 22:10. Matthew chapter 12 verse 32 says, "Either in this age or the age to come." The number 2 is within 12 and 32. These digits can be interchanged either or, and this changing of the second and the fourth digit is the number code. When we change the second and the fourth digits in Luke chapter 22 verse 10, we get 2012. This passage instructs the disciples to follow a man with a water jar. This is symbolic of going into the age of Aquarius in the year 2012. Similarly, quatrain 4-28 becomes 2210, which becomes 2012. As noted previously, the second coming of Jesus is like the days of Noah, and Luke 22:10 is about the Last Supper Jesus had with his 12 disciples. Here is the Lost Book of Nostradamus, image number 35. Note that 3 and 5 are numbers in the Fibonacci sequence, the numbers associated with creation and the galactic alignment. On the left, we see the man holding a serpent. This is Ophiuchus. On the right, we see the man holding the lion. This is Orion. Orion is the cross, and Ophiuchus is the coffin. Thus we see the astrological characters associated with the crucifixion of Jesus, who is placed in the tomb. In the center, there is an 8-spoked wheel. In the wheel, we see ships in the water. This symbolizes the flood of Noah. The hand in the upper left-hand corner holds the 8-spoked wheel. Thus, the hand represents a man holding a water picture, and a water picture is a pun on water pitcher, as in Aquarius. The 8-spoked wheel is symbolic of the galactic alignment of December 21st, 2012. Therefore, we can see the association of the galactic alignment with the flood of Noah, the second coming and crucifixion of Jesus, and Jesus' Last Supper with his 12 disciples. Here is the Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. Jesus is flanked by 12 disciples representing the 12 signs of the zodiac. The zodiac is symbolized in a circle. Now, let's focus on the 8 legs that hold up the table. When we consider that this scene is symbolic of the zodiac circle, the 8 legs are associated with the circle, as in the 8-spoked wheel that symbolizes the galactic alignment of December 21st, 2012. The numbers in Revelation chapter 22, verse 10 become 2012 when we change the second and the fourth digits. The passage reads, "And he saith unto me, Seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand." This passage inspires image number 35. As we can see, the timing of the prophecy is at hand. The hourglass symbolizes time, and the 8-spoked wheel symbolizes December 21st, 2012, and the galactic alignment. This is quatrain I-17. It is clearly about the connection between the story of Moses and the flood of Noah. It reads, "For 40 years the rainbow will not be seen. For 40 years it will be seen every day. The dry earth will grow more parched, and there will be great floods when it is seen." The reference to the dry earth is the 40 years Moses is in the desert, and the great floods is a reference to the flood of Noah. As previously seen, the 40 days and nights of rain is allegory for the Milky Way between Sagittarius and Scorpio. Also, the Ark of Noah and the basket of Moses use the same word, tavah, and that word has an Egyptian root that means coffin. Thus, Ophiuchus is both the basket of Moses and the Ark of Noah. As you can see, Ophiuchus is located at the 17th hour of right ascension, which matches the number of quatrain I-17. Another important number is 1022, which mirrors 2210, and in my analysis, 2210 symbolically transforms into 2012. Exodus chapter 10, verse 22 states, "So Moses stretched out his hands toward the sky, and total darkness covered all Egypt for 3 days." This 3-day darkness can be interpreted as an allegory for the winter solstice, and 2012 marks the galactic alignment where the sun aligned with the center of the Milky Way galaxy. The number 40 occurs frequently. In the flood story, it rains for 40 days and nights. During the Exodus, the Israelites wander for 40 years. After the resurrection, Jesus spends 40 days with his disciples. Numbers chapter 14, verse 34 links days and years. For 40 years, 1 year for each of the 40 days you explored the land, you will suffer for your sins. This supports the symbolic exchange between days and years in the biblical narrative. the allegorical crucifixion may be symbolized in the stars, with the constellation Orion and the winter triangle forming a celestial cross and Skull Hill. This imagery suggests a Passover journey from Orion to Ophiuchus, representing both the coffin and the house of God. In this symbolic reading, Moses represents the sun, and the cross in Orion is a solar symbol. The winter triangle forms a pyramid shape evocative of Egypt. As the sun, Moses, departs from this pyramid or Egypt, it passes over to Ophiuchus, symbolic of both the house of God and the promised land. When Moses parts the Red Sea, it may be interpreted as the Milky Way, split to create a dry path through the cosmic waters, just as a desert path was made through the sea. Finally, Moses dies in this region of the Milky Way, paralleling how Jesus is wounded by Scorpio and pierced by Sagittarius, both figures completing a symbolic solar death during the winter solstice. This is quatrain I-30. The number matches image 30 from the Lost Book of Nostradamus and the 30 degrees of declination where we find Gemini, the arc for the twins. The first two lines read, "Because of the storm at sea, the foreign ship will approach an unknown port." These lines refer to the flood, the ark, and the mountains where the ark will rest. The third line reads, "Notwithstanding the signs of the palm branches." The third line uses the word signs, which is plural. The two signs are Gemini and Cancer and their relationship to the summer solstice. Cancer is the summer solstice in tropical astrology, and Cancer is where we find the northern and southern donkeys. This is why the crowd is waving palms when Jesus rides a donkey. The crowd is attempting to cool Jesus because of the summer heat. This makes Cancer the sign of the palm branches. However, as we see in this astrology chart, the sun is in the constellation Gemini during the summer solstice of 2012, and this makes Gemini the foreign ship, as the sun is in a foreign constellation during the summer solstice. The fourth line reads, "Afterward, there is death and pillage. Good advice comes too late." Death refers to Ophiuchus, the coffin, which is the ark for the clean animals. Pillage refers to the constellation Boots, which is a pun on pirates' booty. This is quatrain 2-15. Notably, 2 times 15 equals 30, which symbolically links to the Lost Book of Nostradamus image number 30, believed to depict the constellation Gemini. This quatrain also appears to connect the second coming of Jesus with the flood of Noah, suggesting both are allegorical stories rooted in celestial events, particularly the Galactic Alignment of 2012. The first two lines read, "Shortly before the monarch is assassinated, Castor and Pollux in the ship, bearded star." The monarch being assassinated refers to Jesus, King of the Jews, crucified on the celestial cross in the constellation Orion, with the winter triangle symbolizing Skull Hill. As illustrated, Gemini, the constellations of the twins, Castor and Pollux, appears to rest on the winter triangle, symbolically representing Mount Ararat, the place where Noah's Ark comes to rest. This reinforces the idea of the Ark of Gemini. Another reference to Castor and Pollux in a ship appears in Acts chapter 28, verse 11. "After 3 months we put out to sea in a ship that had wintered in the island. It was an Alexandrian ship with the figurehead of the twin gods Castor and Pollux." This phrase, "wintered in the island," aligns symbolically with the winter triangle, strengthening the connection between biblical mythology and astronomical archetypes. Moreover, Castor and Pollux are the figurehead of a ship floating in the Milky Way, linking it further with the story of Noah's Ark and the crucifixion. Both events are associated with the winter triangle, reinforcing the idea that the second coming will mirror the days of Noah. Line 2's reference to the bearded star could allude to the beehive cluster in Cancer located near Gemini. Line 4 names Pisa, Asta, Ferrara, and Turin. When plotted on a map and connected, these cities form a cross, symbolizing the crucifixion, reinforcing the idea that the monarch is Jesus. Line 3, however, shifts focus. To interpret it, we consider the quatrain number. 2-15 becomes 2-1 plus 5, or 2-6. This numerical transformation suggests a symbolic connection to the menorah pattern in the winter hexagon, using Sirius as a center point and Orion's belt as candlesticks. The winter hexagon can be viewed as a celestial menorah. Thus, twice 6 may refer to viewing the winter hexagon from both hemispheres or both sides of a planisphere. The phrase, public treasured, emptied by land and sea, could symbolize the contrast between Sirius in the Milky Way and Orion's belt outside the Milky Way. Quatrain 2-15 connects the flood of Noah with the astrological crucifixion and second coming of Jesus. While the inclusion of the menorah introduces a compelling plot twist, a relevant connection appears in the book of Revelation, specifically between the island of Patmos and the Winter Triangle. Let's begin by examining images 12 and 21 from the Lost Book of Nostradamus. The menorah is a mirror image of the north and south sky, and these two illustrations mirror one another, just like the numbers 12 and 21. The birds in each image also reflect the symmetry and serve as links to the flood narrative. The lamb at the bottom of image 12 symbolizes the lamb in Revelation chapter 5 verse 6, where the 7 horns, 7 eyes, and 7 spirits of God correspond to the 7 candlesticks in the menorah. Allegorically, these candlesticks are held by the constellation Orion. John's vision of Christ in Revelation 1 aligns with this. It alludes to the Orion constellation and its relationship to the celestial menorah. The sheaf of wheat held by the popes in opposite hands symbolizes Sirius, the center of the menorah. The sheaf identifies Sirius as the Star of Bethlehem. When Sirius sets in the west, Virgo rises in the east. Virgo is the time of the wheat harvest, and this makes Virgo the house of bread. Bethlehem means house of bread. Thus, Sirius is the star that becomes Bethlehem as it becomes Virgo. The arrows and keys, also shown in mirrored positions, emphasize duality. The arrow in Orion represents the keys to heaven. As Orion descends in the west, it passes over to Ophiuchus, the house of God, or heaven. In Revelation, this motion is represented by the keys to death and Hades. Now consider the numbers 12 and 21. If you reduce 21 to 2 plus 1, you get 3, and 3 plus 12 is 15. This brings us to image 15 from the Lost Book of Nostradamus, forming a symbolic pair of 2 15s like quatrain 2-15. Image 15 shows a pope with a cross on his garment, symbolizing Orion, while a dog and a sword appear, referencing Psalm 22, where the dogs surround the crucified figure who wants to be free from the sword. The sword in image 12 is coming from the Pope's mouth, and this comes from the book of Revelation, where coming out of his mouth was a sharp, double-edged sword. His face was like the sun, shining in all its brilliance. Image 12 includes a creature that is half man, half worm or serpent, echoing Psalm 22's line, "I am a worm and not a man." Image 21 also features a serpent, likely symbolic of Eridanus, the celestial river next to Orion. Together, these symbols link Psalm 22 and Revelation, and both texts metaphorically connect to the Milky Way. Psalm 22, verse 14 says, "I am poured out like water." Revelation 1-15, "His voice was like the sound of rushing waters." Revelation chapter 4, verses 5 through 6, "Before the throne, 7 lamps were blazing. These are the 7 spirits of God." Also, before the throne was what looked like a sea of glass, clear as crystal. These passages allegorically describe the Milky Way as a sea, as a source of light, and the place where divine voices are heard. Now let's examine the island of Patmos, where John receives the revelation. According to Greek mythology, Patmos rose from the sea when Artemis persuaded Zeus, with the help from her twin brother Apollo, to allow the island to emerge. This mirrors the story of Mount Ararat rising from the waters of the flood. In the Egyptian myth, when the first land rose out of the dark waters of chaos, the shining Bennu bird alighted on this primeval mound. Symbolically, Patmos, Mount Ararat, and the primeval mound correspond to the winter triangle. Artemis, a triple goddess, is associated with the moon, the underworld, and the hunt. Her constellation is Orion, the celestial hunter. The cross-shaped stars of Orion serve as solar symbols, reinforcing Artemis's connection through her twin, Apollo, the sun. Therefore, Artemis, as Orion, is symbolically linked to Patmos and by extension to the winter triangle. In Revelation 1-16, John writes, "I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me, and when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands." This turning around suggests a mirror image, which is seen by flipping over a planisphere. John, located on Patmos, symbolically the winter triangle, turns to see the other side of the night sky, revealing the celestial menorah encoded in the stars. These 3 images combine Psalm 22 with Revelation. In image 15, the central figure is green like Osiris, leading me to suspect that Osiris is being revealed in John's revelation. As John turns, he writes, "Among the lampstands was someone like a son of man, dressed in a robe reaching down to his feet, and with a golden sash around his chest." Osiris is traditionally depicted wearing a white crown of Upper Egypt. Revelation describes the hair on his head was white like wool, as white as snow. Osiris is merged with Ra, and the eye of Ra can be equated with the solar disk. Revelation continues, his eyes were like blazing fire, and his feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace. Revelation chapter 4 describes the throne in heaven. And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper and ruby, colors that could be associated with the hues of the sun. It also says, a rainbow that shone like an emerald encircled the throne. Here, the imagery parallels the green-skinned Osiris seated on his throne, surrounded by a rainbow of colors. In Egyptian symbolism, Isis is represented by the star Sirius and is also associated with the throne itself. Therefore, the constellation Orion, identified with Osiris, could be envisioned as seated upon Sirius, representing Isis as the throne. The figure in image 15 is holding the keys in his left hand. The arrow in the constellation Orion can be interpreted as the key to heaven. Revelation supports an Osiris parallel stating, "And I hold the keys of death and Hades." Hades refers to the realm of the dead and the underworld, and in Egyptian mythology, Osiris was the judge and lord of the dead and the underworld. Now I will analyze the quatrains of Nostradamus that support the idea that image 15 is symbolic of Osiris and the astrological crucifixion in Orion, specifically quatrains I-81 and I-82. The first 2 lines of quatrain I-81 read, "9 will be set apart from the human flock, separated from judgment and advice." In Egyptian mythology, the Aeneid, or the Great Aeneid, was a group of 9 deities that included Osiris. Lines 3 and 4 state, "Their fate is to be divided as they depart, Kappa, Theta, Lambda, dead, banished, and scattered." This mirrors the Osiris myth. He is slain, cut into 14 pieces, and scattered across Egypt. The Greek letters Kappa, Theta, and Lambda may serve as symbolic markers for the Osiris allegory involving Orion and Ophiuchus. The symbol for Kappa is a K. The symbol for Lambda is a triangle shape. The symbol for Theta is a circle with a horizontal line within it. Theta is associated with death and laying out a corpse. Kappa and Lambda can be combined to represent Orion and the Winter Triangle, while Theta may symbolize Ophiuchus, the coffin, situated within the entwined serpents, which together form the Ouroboros, the ancient emblem of infinity. Quatrain I-82 serves as a corollary to Quatrain I-81, and together they support the idea that the parallels between Osiris and Jesus are rooted in allegories that use the Orion constellation as a prompt for the narratives. Lines 1 and 2 read, "When the great wooden columns tremble in the south wind, covered with blood." The great wooden column symbolizes the cross on which Jesus is crucified, becoming covered with blood. The south wind refers metaphorically to the southern part of the night sky. As shown in the image on the right, Orion appears upright when viewed from the south, while on the left, Orion is upside down, linked to the legend of Simon Peter, who was crucified upside down as he gets behind Jesus. Line 4 reads that Vienna and the land of Austria will tremble. The trembling mentioned in lines 1 and 4 alludes to the earthquake that occurred at the moment of Jesus' death on the cross. Line 4 also reinforces the idea that the great wooden column is a cross, since the coat of arms of Vienna features a cross. Line 3 reads, "Such a great assembly then pours forth." Psalm 22, verse 14 states, "I am poured out like water," and Psalm 22, verse 25 says, "From you comes the theme of my praise in the great assembly." This image depicts the great assembly of the figures from Psalm 22 surrounding the Orion constellation. As I have demonstrated, the parallels between Osiris and Jesus are primarily rooted in astrological allegories involving Orion, Ophiuchus, and the death of the sun during the winter solstice. The myth of Isis and Osiris is a profound love story based on an astrological allegory. In my flights of imagination, I envision Osiris singing the parts of Marvin Gaye, and Isis singing the parts of Tammy Terrell in the song "Ain't No Mountain High Enough." As Isis and Osiris are separated by the Winter Triangle, they sing, "Ain't No Mountain High Enough." As they set below the western horizon, they sing, "Ain't No Valley Low Enough." As they pass over and transform into Ophiuchus and Virgo, separated by the Milky Way, they sing, "Ain't No River Wide Enough." Similarly, in the movie Shakespeare in Love, Shakespeare says, "A broad river divides my lovers." To support the winter solstice narrative, they sing, "No wind, no rain, nor winter's cold." To further inspire my flights of imagination, they sing, "If you're ever in trouble, I'll be there on the double." The only thing I enjoy more than analyzing song lyrics within an astrotheological context is writing my own. Here is my Astrotheology mixtape.
Double, toil and trouble, every point twice done and then done. Double, toil and trouble, every point twice done and then done. Double, toil and trouble, every point twice done and then done. Double, toil and trouble, every point twice done and then done. They said I was bad, I'll convince you that I'm good. The cross is in the stars, not a fucking piece of wood. I see dead people in the stars upon Dunsinane Hill. When Venus came by, I got a blueberry frill. The night is long, that never finds the day. The night is long, that never signs the day. I fly like a butterfly, I sting like a bee. I'll knock you the fuck out with astrotheology. Double, toil and trouble, every point twice done and then done. They said I'm bad, I'll convince you that I'm good. The cross is in the stars, not a fucking piece of wood. The dogs are barking and the river is flowing. I'll follow the rabbit night is long, that never finds the day. The light is long, that never finds the day. I fly like a butterfly, I sting like a bee. I'll knock you the fuck out with astrotheology. Double, toil and trouble, every point twice done and done. I fly like a butterfly, I sting like a bee. I'll knock you the fuck out with astrotheology. 72 and then I'm done till the rising of the sun. The scorpion strikes at bottom wood. At me twice and thrice am I good. 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 They said I was bad, I'll convince you that I'm good. The cross is in the stars, not a fucking piece of wood. On the other side, I'll get the food. Next to an Egyptian coffin filled with loot. The night is long, that never finds the day. The night is long, that never finds the day. I fly like a butterfly, I stay like a bee. I'll knock you the fuck out with astrotheology. Double, total and trouble, every point twice done and then done. Double, total and trouble, every point twice done and then done. Double, total and trouble, every point twice done and then done. Double, toil and trouble, every point twice done and then done. It's my destiny. You're like a shining star that's always next to me. I fell for you, walking in the sea, west of Eden, heading for the tree. I'm fortune's full, it's my destiny. Caught in the waves of a stormy sea, in and out of the lake of fire. Kiss me deadly with desire. In the twilight we'll find bliss, when by the book we shall kiss. I've got a rabbit's foot and heaven's key. I'll follow you and you'll follow me. I'm fortune's full, it's my destiny. The goddess of love, it's time for tea. Oh, in and out of the lake of fire. Kiss me deadly with desire. In the twilight we'll find bliss, when by the book we shall kiss. Our fortune's full, it's my destiny. You're like a shining star that's always next to me. I fell for you, walking in the sea, west of Eden, heading for the tree. I'm fortune's full, it's my destiny. Caught in the waves of a stormy sea, in and out of the lake of fire. Kiss me deadly with desire. In the twilight we'll find bliss, when by the book we shall kiss.
On a hillside in the north sky, the wind blows on the waxing moon. by the pricking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes, by the pricking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes. The scene is serene, but what do I mean? In 6th hour, he's holding the keys. The rock is bloody, and so is the blade. One eye for an eye, upside down in the sky, by the pricking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes, by the pricking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes. A bloody slaughter in the water. The lion's ear bleeds tonight. A bloody slaughter in the water. The lion's ear bleeds tonight. Above the bull, next to the dogs, carries the cross, not made of logs. The rock is bloody, and so is the blade. One eye for an eye, upside down in the sky, by the pricking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes, by the pricking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes, by the breaking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes, by the breaking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes, by the breaking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes, by the breaking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes, by the pricking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes.
Holy, holy, holy ship. Holy, holy, holy ship.
A storm rolls in, the clock hits 0. Jupiter shines, a rising hero. 40 days and 40 nights, sailing through the starry light. Holy ship, holy, holy ship, riding high in the Milky Way drift. Venus weeps in the olive tree. Corvus flies above the sea. 40 days and 40 nights, sailing through the starry light. Holy ship, holy ship, galaxies in the lunar mist. Triangles rise from sky so wide, and giants march on the moon's white side. Triangles rise above the tide, and time unfolds where stars collide. Mercury calls to Mars and the sun. Skyfather is naked, the wine has him spun. 40 days and 40 nights, through constellations and sacred rites. Holy ship, sailing on where the darkening night's holy, 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 holy ship, holy, holy ship, holy, holy ship, holy, holy ship. Take us home on your holy trip. Holy, holy ship, holy, holy ship, holy, holy ship, holy, holy. Take us home on your holy trip.